The story that Mark offers us this Sunday morning is troublesome. We're dealing with an exorcism, and that is troubling territory for proper Presbyterians. We have far less problems with healing stories. After all, we have all known someone who was ill and was made well, and most usually at the hands of medical professionals. Healing stories are far more palatable to us because we are sophisticated enough to know that demons and devils are not the cause of sickness and disease, physical or mental. We are perfectly content with blaming viruses and bacteria and environmental conditions and even unknown causes for illnesses and diseases. But demons and devils? Really? Are we really being asked to accept the pre-scientific worldview of the first century people? Are we supposed to buy that perspective that the embodiment, the anthropomorphic notion that evil is personified, is the cause of this poor man's brokenness? That was the line of questioning and incredulity with which I approached this story. I, like you, am the product of a modern and postmodern era. Demons and devils? Really? What am I? What are you? What are we to do with this story? Perhaps we need to begin by allowing Mark to tell his story in the way he knows it. We find Jesus, not at home in Israel, but beyond Israel, out on the margins. Jesus is among the 10 cities of the Decapolis. Now, the Decapolis was a group of 10 cities on the eastern front of the Roman Empire in the first centuries BC and AD. They formed a group because of their language, their culture, their location, and their political status, with each functioning as an autonomous city-state, but completely dependent on Rome. The Decapolis was at the center. Welcome back to Evansville. The Decapolis was at the center of Greek and Roman culture in the region and was completely surrounded by Semitic-speaking people who perceived the Greeks and Romans as equally profane and unclean, and with whom they would have no contact. Jesus has gone to work outside the bounds, as we Presbyterians would put it. We're not aware that anyone sanctioned his work among these people. He has gone out among the Gentiles, and such interactions and restrictions ran the risk of whoever went among the Gentiles becoming labeled as defiled and unclean. Jesus was in the region of the Gerasenes when he was met by a man who lived among the tombs and was possessed of an unclean spirit. Don't freak out yet. There are a couple of problems confronting Jesus. First, there is the Levitical injunction that if one comes in contact with a corpse, that one is defiled. Add to that the prophet Isaiah condemns those who sit inside tombs and spend nights in secret places, who eat swine's flesh. We are told that there is a herd of pigs nearby. We aren't in Kansas or Missouri or Israel anymore. We are way out on the margins. The man that confronts Jesus is possessed of an unclean spirit. We don't know exactly what that means. The description implies that he has been cast out by his family and friends who do not know what to do with him. He has been physically restrained, but has snapped the chains and restraints with what must have seemed to be superhuman strength. He howled like a wolf at the moon and cut and bruised himself as he ran among the graves. The dude was seriously messed up. He lived among those who were considered evil, but he was even too evil to live among them. The evil people had cast him out of their company, out of their community, out of their compassion. This man lived on the margins of the margin. Now, if you want to do a forensic psychological profile of the man's case and condition, open your DSM and have at it. Was he mentally ill? Quite possibly, but that is not the point. The reality is that evil exists in the world, and when people are marinated in it, catastrophic things happen. This man from Gerasene was seemingly and completely beyond help and hope, bound and constrained by a force and a situation from which he could not extricate himself, and enslaved to a life from which no one could liberate him. And then Jesus comes along. Jesus comes along and sets the man free. The demons are cast out. The pigs rush down the hill and off the edge so fast that the swine flew. I worked on that one a long time. I'm just done now. You didn't get it. Jesus tells him to go and tell his story to his friends in town. The townspeople come out, and what do? They beg Jesus to leave. Now, there are about 3 separate sermons right there, but we're not going to do those this morning. What captivated me was the image of this cast out among the marginalized and Jesus' response. It is that aspect of this story that I invite you to consider with me as we head for home. This man was not like other people. What we can only call evil had surrounded and infilled this man. The systems of the Roman Empire's world had failed him. His family system had failed him. His circle of friends had failed him. Any semblance of a reflection of how God created this world to be was absent from this man's experience. Any trace of basic human worth did not exist for this man. Any minuscule drop of compassion was missing from this man's life. Any form of justice was non-existent in this man's life. And it is to this very man, from the margins of the margin, that Jesus comes and with whom Jesus engages. Jesus still sees the image of God behind the bruises and the contusions the man bears. Jesus sees a community that waits to welcome beyond the man's isolation and friendlessness. Jesus sees a child of God of inestimable worth. Jesus sees a human being in need of compassion, understanding, and intervention. Jesus sees something that the empire of Caesar could not see. but which is as plain as the nose on your face in the empire of God. Jesus condemns the evil. Jesus confronts the evil. Jesus casts out the evil. Jesus brings welcome where there was hopelessness. Jesus brings wholeness where there was brokenness. Jesus brings life where there was only existence. Jesus brings abundant life, literally in a place where death surrounded. Jesus brings restoration and remaking to one who had been bound to the margins of life. And that, of course, is what Jesus calls his disciples to do as well. Jesus sends out the disciples a little bit later, Mark tells us, and gives them the power to force out evil spirits and to heal every kind of disease and sickness. That has not changed. Jesus still sends out his disciples of 2020 to confront evil, to liberate those in bondage, to restore hope to those who are without it, and to implement change in the empire of Caesar with the life-giving reality of the empire of God. Who are the people on the margins of the margin? The person who will spend this cold winter's night in Evansville in their car or under Pigeon Creek Bridge. The grandmother who is raising a grandchild on her Social Security check and hopes to be able to live long enough to see that child to independence. The teenager who has come out as LGBTQIA and was thrown out of the family and surfs from couch to couch each night. Who are the people who live on the margins of the margins? The black-skinned teenager who has done nothing wrong but is pulled over for a baseless traffic violation. The child with an individual education plan, an IPE, who receives glorified babysitting instead of a proper education. The developmentally challenged person, young person, who is looked down on, or even worse, is completely invisible to the person buying groceries, and yet that young person is bagging those groceries and trying to earn a living. Who are the people who live on the margins of the margin? The poor, who can no longer afford to rent a safe, modest home in Evansville because of gentrification and overpriced condos for the well-off. The single mother who is forced to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to provide for her children. The family that cowers in their home as the gunfire echoes down their street. These are the people, and so many others like them, who are ignored and disempowered by the evils of the empire of Caesar. They are in bondage to forces that are beyond their control. They feel the need for someone to come alongside and take on that evil with them. And that is why you and I are here. In Jesus Christ, God has called and commissioned us to move beyond our actions of mercy and immediate help and to work for the changing of the systems that push some of our fellow human beings to the margins of the margin. You and I are called to do work of justice because, as Cornel West reminds us, justice is what love looks like in public. You and I are called to work until that day when justice rolls down like mighty waters and righteousness like a raging stream. You and I are called to the life-giving, life-restoring work of justice, though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us. Let us confront the evil that surrounds us. Let us cast out those forces that are eternally opposed to God, those forces that bind and destroy our brothers and sisters. Let us seek out the evil that stalks in darkness and destroys at noon. Let us do what our Lord commissioned us to do. Let us do justice and bring life to all. Let us be the church. Demons and devils? Really? Not for long. Not for now. And not forevermore. Amen.